You feel it when you wake at 3 a.m. and the silence feels staged, when your reflection looks back at you like it knows a secret. What if the Matrix wasn't fiction at all? What if it was a ritual, a 2,000-year-old initiation disguised as a blockbuster, a gospel wrapped in leather coats and green code? The film didn't just entertain, it remembered. Beneath the gunfire and neon light, it whispered a forbidden truth. The Gnostics died to preserve this world is a prison, and the bars are made of thought. Neo is not a hero, he's a symbol. The pneumatic, the awakened soul who feels the vibration of something wrong, who senses that the hum of the machine is not the song of the spirit. Every glitch, every déjà vu, every dream you can't shake, is a knock at the door of your own awareness. The Archons wear black suits now, feeding you illusions of safety, comfort, and certainty, while your deeper self sleeps beneath their code. And then there's Morpheus, god of dreams, the revealer, the initiator, the one who places the chalice before you and asks if you're ready to drink. The red pill is not a drug, it's remembrance. To swallow it is to see through the demiurge's architecture of control, to feel the walls of the mind cage crack beneath the weight of your own perception. Somewhere, beneath the glow of monitors and the buzz of the city, someone sits awake, coffee gone cold, eyes raw with hunger. Today this idea, once only spoken in hushed tones, is resurfacing. It's appearing in our memes, in our online discussions, and in the collective suspicion that modern life feels increasingly hollow. They know something is off. They can't go back to sleep. We're talking about the shocking possibility that up to half of all people you meet might be what some traditions call organic portals, bodies animated by something. Yes, but not by a unique, eternal soul. They are functional, reactive, embedded within our shared reality, not as players, but as programmed elements designed to maintain the grand illusion. Their purpose? To keep the real ones, the truly conscious, distracted, disoriented, and asleep. This isn't a casual claim. This is a challenge to everything you think you know about who you are, and who they are. And the very fact that you're here listening to these words suggests you are not one of them. You are ready to see what comes next. Because we are about to peel back the layers of this matrix, tracing its origins, exposing its ancient roots, and revealing how it shapes our lives today. By the time we finish, the world around you will look drastically different. Once you see this truth, there's no going back to sleep. Ancient shadows, digital reflections. This perception of a fabricated reality is not new. In fact, it is as old as human thought itself. Consider the philosopher Plato. Over 2,000 years ago, he told a story, the allegory of the cave. In his tale, humans are chained in a cave from birth. They face a wall, seeing only shadows cast by a fire behind them. These shadows are all they have ever known, so they believe them to be reality. When one prisoner escapes, sees the sun, and returns to tell the others, they greet him not with thanks, but with hostility. They want to kill him. Truth in an artificial world is a threat. Plato's intuition was powerful, but far older revelations held an even more piercing insight. The Gnostics, ancient mystics whose writings were often condemned and hidden, described a reality constructed not by the true loving source, but by a lesser arrogant entity. They called this entity the demiurge. This demiurge, they claimed, created the material world as a spiritual prison. He and his servile entities, the Archons, governed this prison. These Archons were not just invisible jailers. They invaded human minds. They fed illusions. They rewrote perception. They kept the soul bound to a world of false light, disconnected from its true divine origin. Does that sound familiar? It is the foundational myth for countless stories, including a famous one about machines using humans as batteries, living in an artificial dream. The Gnostics, however, offered a way out. They taught that liberation came through gnosis, direct, intuitive, inner knowledge of the trap itself, not belief, but inner knowing. This theme resurfaced intensely in the mind of science fiction visionary Philip K. Dick. In a lecture from 1977, he flatly stated, "We are living in a computer-programmed reality." He believed our only clues were the glitches, moments when reality seemed to bend, repeat, or contradict itself. For Dick, the world was unstable, full of ruptures. These moments were hints. We were trapped in a manufactured layer of perception. Something, or someone, was behind it. His novels imagined worlds where androids believed they were human. They showed people living inside synthetic memories. False realities were sold as truth. For him, the real terror wasn't the machine. It was forgetting you were inside one. Now fast forward to our time. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed his simulation hypothesis. He argued that if any civilization ever reached a technological level where they could simulate consciousness within virtual environments, then the mathematical odds overwhelmingly favor us being inside such a simulation, not outside it. Elon Musk, a man who shapes our physical world, echoes this. He declared there is a 1 in billions chance we're in base reality. He pointed to video game technology. It evolves so rapidly. The line between simulated and real is collapsing. If it continues, it will be indistinguishable from life. So how do we know it hasn't already happened? We might not be players. We might be characters. This brings us to a chilling question. If this world is a simulation, is everyone in it truly conscious? Or are some merely programs, functions of the system, designed to keep the illusion stable? In video games, we know the difference. There are real players, individuals with agency, free will, choice. Then there are NPCs, non-player characters. They walk, they talk, they repeat lines of dialogue, but they have no internal world. They exist to populate the space, to give the illusion of life without truly living. The internet picked up on this distinction. In the late 2010s, memes began to spread. They labeled certain people NPCs. These people looked real, but they always parroted official narratives. They had no opinions, only slogans, no insight, only reaction. It became a joke, a symbol of mass conformity. But beneath that joke was a far older suspicion. What if some people, perhaps many, are not truly people? What if this idea isn't crazy? What if it's a memory surfacing from a deeper, ancient knowing? What if our ancestors already understood that not all who appear human carry a soul? What if, in a vast, simulated matrix, there are only a limited number of conscious entities, and the rest are constructs? They are reflections. They are algorithms, organic shells repeating patterns, background code. If you find yourself leaning into these possibilities, if these questions resonate deep within you, it's because you are hungry for a truth beyond the surface. For more explorations into the hidden layers of our reality, consider subscribing to this channel. We regularly confront ideas others are too afraid to speak aloud. The system's design. In the year 2002, an occult research group known as the Quantum Future School published some unusual writings. These came through a woman named Laura Knight Jadczyk. She claimed to receive transmissions from higher density intelligences who called themselves the Cassiopeans. These communications, presented in a hypnotic question and answer format, introduced a concept that would send shivers through fringe spiritual communities. The Cassiopeans claimed 1 out of every 2 people on this planet may be effectively soulless. They are organic portals. Let that sink in. Half the global population. According to this message, might be what the system calls functionally human, but not spiritually sovereign. Their consciousness does not arise from a divine, eternal source. Instead, they exist to fill space. They carry out programs. They reflect the behaviors of those around them, not out of malice, but because they are structurally incapable of anything else. The purpose of these beings, said the channelers, is simple: to maintain the matrix. They do not question reality. They do not challenge the script. They move through life as extensions of the control system itself. This is where the term organic portals was coined. Not demon, not machine, but a biological interface, hollow of essence, yet capable of perfect imitation. This theory did not stay in the shadows. It seeped into online communities. It spread through forums, PDF archives, and the occult corners of the internet. For years, it remained niche. It was too fringe for the public to absorb. Then the world changed. In the late 2010s, the rise of memes created cultural shortcuts for complex ideas. Then one image went viral, a gray, expressionless cartoon face. Beneath it, the label NPC. It mocked people who repeated official narratives, political slogans, or media scripts without critical thought. It became a joke, an internet shorthand for mindless conformity. But beneath the joke, an old intuition was stirring. Wikipedia defines the NPC meme as symbolizing people deemed to not think for themselves, whose personalities are entirely determined by their surroundings, with no conscious processing. Sound familiar? That is the Cassiopean description repackaged in a meme. By 2018, the NPC meme was everywhere. Major media outlets covered it. It had jumped from message boards into the mainstream. More importantly, it had jumped from symbolism into belief. People weren't just using NPCs as a joke. They were saying things like, "I'm surrounded by people who are just empty. They don't question anything. They don't even seem to think. They're like robots with flesh." On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, hashtags like NPCs, soulless beings, and matrix people began to appear. Viral videos showed people walking in loops, staring into nothing, responding to questions with strange delays. Whether staged or authentic, the impression was powerful. Something is off. Something feels scripted. The phrase soulless humans became more than an occult dogma. It became a feeling, a knowing realization. Not all humans are equally awake. Some operate purely through external input, reacting rather than reflecting, moving rather than choosing. This intuitive suspicion began to merge with digital culture. Memes became mirrors. Jokes became beliefs. Viewers commented, "Once you see it, you can't unsee it." You try to go deep with them, and there's just nothing there. It's like talking to a void. But this wasn't just digital paranoia. It was the rebirth of an ancient understanding. The mirror and the abyss. In spiritual traditions across the world, there are subtle parallels to this dichotomy. In Gnosticism, as we discussed, not all humans contain the divine spark. Some are simply vessels of the demiurge's illusion. In Sufism, there are the veiled, those who walk the earth unaware, whose hearts are not yet lit by the fire of truth. In Kabbalah, there is the concept of fruta pleptip, shells that conceal the light within, or sometimes conceal nothing at all. So when a channeled message from 2002 suggests half of us are soulless, and 20 years later millions of people describe others as NPCs, a crucial question emerges. Is this convergence accidental, or is it an ancestral memory returning in modern form? You don't have to believe the source. You don't have to accept that a woman in Florida received a message from higher beings. But you must ask, why does this resonate so strongly with so many people now? Why, in an age of constant distraction, synthetic personalities, and social scripts, does the idea of soulless humans feel more relevant than ever? Perhaps, at some level, we already know. We've seen it in the eyes of strangers who never truly look back. We've felt it in conversations that never touch the core. We've walked among bodies, animated by something, but not someone. Perhaps the old mystics were only giving language to what we couldn't yet describe. A disturbing possibility. Not all people are people. Some are simply reflections in the cave, shadows cast to keep you from ever realizing there's a world beyond. If the theory of organic portals holds some truth, if half of those around you are not truly conscious, not truly sovereign, not truly alive in the way you are, then what does that mean for how you view the world? More importantly, what does that mean for how you view yourself? The moment this idea enters your mind, it doesn't just sit as an abstract curiosity. It begins to seep into your perception of reality, coloring every interaction. You start to question the depth of people's responses, the authenticity of their emotions, the presence behind their eyes. Then, slowly, a disturbing realization emerges. This idea doesn't only isolate others, it isolates you. Psychologically, this theory touches something deep, something ancient, our need to make sense of unconsciousness in others. One of the most powerful frameworks for understanding this comes from Carl Jung. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow. These are the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the traits we repress, deny, or disown. According to Jung, what we cannot face within, we often project onto others. We see them as shallow, soulless, robotic, not because they are, but because we cannot tolerate our own lack of presence. Jung wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." In this light, labeling others as organic portals can become a form of projection. Instead of confronting our own sleepwalking, our own automated behavior, we externalize the problem. We say they are the unconscious ones. But what if the emptiness you see in others is just a reflection of what you've neglected within yourself? Think back to your own life. Haven't there been moments where you moved through the world on autopilot? Where you responded out of habit, not intention? Where your reactions were programmed by upbringing, media, trauma, or fear? In those moments, weren't you too functioning like a conduit? Like a looped script with no observer behind the screen? We've all lived that way. And if we're honest, most of society encourages it. So the distinction between a true soul and an organic portal may not be as clean as we want it to be. It may not be a matter of having or not having a soul. It might be about remembering it, activating it, embodying it fully. That's not a permanent state. Consciousness flickers, awareness fluctuates. Some are dim, some are dormant, some are buried under years of programming and pain. This is where the philosophy becomes ethically dangerous. If you truly believe someone is soulless, what moral responsibility do you feel toward them? If they're not conscious, do they deserve compassion? Do they deserve understanding? Or do they become disposable? Throughout history, dehumanization has always begun with metaphysical distinctions, claims that certain groups lacked a soul, or were spiritually inferior, or were biologically predetermined to serve. Colonialism justified itself this way. Religious wars were waged this way. Genocide began this way. It never starts with violence. It starts with language, with the idea that those people over there aren't really people at all. That is the shadow of this theory. The moment you use it to stop listening, to stop empathizing, to stop being curious, it turns you into the very thing it warns about. It makes you a function of the system, cold, reactive, disconnected. You may begin by trying to spot the portals, but without deep self-awareness, you risk becoming one. To truly navigate this territory, you must carry the burden of discernment. You must hold paradox, the possibility that some people are empty, and the humility to admit you can't always tell. You must be able to look at a blank stare and say, maybe there's no one home, and still leave the light on, just in case someone wakes up. A different lens. This brings us to an alternative interpretation of the theory, one that renames it not as an accusation, but as a metaphor. What if organic portals don't represent literal soulless beings? What if they symbolize states of spiritual dormancy? What if they're not different types of people, but different states within people? Some awake, some asleep, some seeking, some settled, some activated, others mimicking. In this frame, the theory isn't dehumanizing. It's diagnostic. It's a call to awareness. It invites you to reflect. When are you present? When are you just repeating lines? When are you choosing your life? When are you playing out an inherited script? In this light, the system doesn't just create organic portals, it relies on them. A conscious being cannot be easily manipulated. A conscious being questions, resists, disrupts, but an unconscious one, it follows, it obeys, it adapts to whatever programming is downloaded next. That's why this theory resonates so deeply in our modern world. Social media has flattened communication into loops. News cycles feed emotional responses on schedule. Algorithms predict your behavior more accurately than your own family. It's not hard to look around and feel like you're surrounded by programmed entities, because in many ways you are, but not necessarily because they lack souls. It's because the world has conditioned them to forget they have one. And here is the real challenge. If you truly believe you are not an organic portal, that you are one of the rare conscious ones, then you have a responsibility. You don't get to isolate. You don't get to mock. You don't get to feel superior. Your role then is not to escape the matrix. It is to awaken others, to plant seeds, to speak light into dark places, to see a blank stare and risk kindness, risk patience, or risk being wrong. Because if even one of them is reachable, if even one spark is buried under the code, then your refusal to act could be the very thing that lets them stay asleep. This isn't easy. It is far more comfortable to write people off, to call them bots, sheep, NPCs, but comfortable isn't true. The truth is, awakening is a fragile, painful process. Most people resist it, not because they're soulless, but because they're afraid of letting go of the script, afraid of the silence that comes when the program ends, afraid of taking full responsibility for their thoughts, their lives, their existence. So maybe the real question isn't who is soulless. Maybe the real question is who still has a chance to wake up. And even deeper than that, how much of me is still asleep? The line between human and NPC doesn't run through society. It runs through every individual. Every day, in every choice, we decide which side of that line we stand on. So hold the theory gently. Don't let it become a sword. Let it be a mirror. When you look into someone's eyes and feel nothing staring back, don't assume you've found an organic portal. Ask yourself instead, is there anything I can do to light the spark within them? Or have I already let my own flame go out? For more insights into these deep spiritual concepts, explore our esoteric knowledges or demonologies playlists. You'll find the link in the pinned comment below. Your rebellion, your truth. We have walked through one of the most unsettling thought structures to exist. It sits on the edge of spiritual and philosophical inquiry. The idea that not all people are people, that some are organic portals, soulless, reactive, embedded into reality to keep others in line with the matrix. You've seen its roots in ancient texts, its viral resurgence in memes, its undeniable resonance with how many now interpret society's behaviors. The question must now be asked, where does this leave you? If you followed this journey with curiosity, it's because somewhere deep within you, there is already a suspicion that something is off in this world, that some people are asleep, but not the kind of sleep that dreams, the kind of sleep that mimics life without ever living. But the final truth is not found in proving or disproving the theory. The truth is found in how you live because of it. First, understand this. The idea of organic portals is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. If you consider yourself a conscious being in a world of artificial patterns and repetitive programs, then you carry a burden. You are the anomaly, the disruption, the node of resistance in a system that feeds on mindless repetition. This means your presence must not become another form of judgment. It must become a force of awakening. It starts with watching your own habits, your own programs. The Matrix doesn't just install its code in others, it installs it in you. Every social cue you obey without question. Every time you scroll past your discomfort. Every opinion you inherit without verifying it in your soul. Every script you recite to stay accepted. These are the fingerprints of unconscious architecture. Before you accuse others of being portals, you must look in the mirror and ask, how many of my thoughts are truly mine? The Matrix doesn't fear emotion. It doesn't fear belief. What it fears is self-awareness. Awareness is the root of freedom. A person who is aware cannot be manipulated. A person who is aware cannot be turned against themselves. A person who is aware, even when standing alone, becomes more powerful than an entire army of sleeping minds. So the system does everything it can to lull you back to sleep. Distraction, division, noise, emotional flooding, dopamine loops, predictive programming. Your task is not just to notice these tactics in the world. It is to eliminate them from your own being. This is what the mystics understood. This is what the ancient initiates practiced. They did not spend their lives theorizing about who had a soul and who didn't. They spent their lives refining their own consciousness until they could walk through illusion untouched, until they became immune to the hypnotic pull of the dream. They called it many things: gnosis, satori, enlightenment, liberation. But the core principle was always the same: wake up and help others do the same. If you believe the theory of organic portals holds truth, then ask yourself, what does that demand of you? Does it mean you isolate and withhold your light? Or does it mean you burn even brighter? Does it mean you avoid shallow people? Or does it mean you become a mirror so powerful that even still water reflects the stars? Because even if half the world is soulless, and let's assume that's true, then that makes your light twice as rare and twice as vital. It also means you were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to be understood by the programmed. You were never meant to belong to the crowds, repeating what they were told. You were designed to be disruptive. You were placed here to short-circuit the simulation from within. But be warned, the system knows how to mimic light. Not all who speak of awareness are awake. Not all who post about spirituality are free. One of the system's favorite tactics is to co-opt truth, to turn it into a brand, a trend, a safe little echo chamber. True awakening will always make you uncomfortable first. It will strip you of false certainty. It will demand self-destruction before it offers self-realization. It will never ever let you forget. Freedom has a price. So what now? Now you choose. You decide what to do with this knowledge. You decide whether this idea becomes a cage or a key. You can take the theory of organic portals and use it as a weapon. Judge everyone. Isolate yourself. Grow bitter and cold and smug. That's what the system wants. It wants you alone, disconnected, floating in your own superiority, while it continues to feed off the herd. Or you can take the theory as a lens, not to divide, but to discern, not to harden your heart, but to sharpen your awareness, not to close doors, but to know when to knock and when to walk away. Maybe some people are not portals at all. Maybe they're just in pain. Maybe their soul is buried beneath years of manipulation, trauma, and programming. Maybe your refusal to write them off is the very thread that pulls them back into their own humanity. Or maybe not. Maybe some truly are just hollow, just scripts, just reflections. But the point isn't who they are. The point is who you become in their presence. In the end, there are only two kinds of people: those who become the program and those who break it. So break it. Be the glitch that makes others pause. Be the depth that shatters shallow conversation. Be the silence that makes noise uncomfortable. Be the soul that reminds others they have one. And know this: if the theory of organic portals is true, it means this reality is not as real as it seems. And that means you are not bound by its rules. Your attention is your weapon. Your energy is your currency. Your soul is your firewall. Protect it, sharpen it, use it with precision. In a world full of synthetic identity, your inner truth is the final rebellion. If you've made it this far, if these words moved something in you, if you felt a recognition that cannot be explained, then it means you're not one of them. You're one of us. Now go prove it. Not with arguments, not with beliefs, but with the way you walk through this world. Awake, silent, unshakable, real. Leave a comment below. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt that chilling absence, a sense of no one home? Until next time, stay awake, stay sovereign,